Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm so pleased to be here in India to be able to share some perspective on responsible information sharing, national security, geospatial information sharing. I want to also thank some key partners, Sanjay Kumar in Geospatial Media, Mark Record, and the Open Geospatial Consortium for facilitating my ability to be with you this morning. The plan for my presentation is to give a little bit of background on my mission to start, our vision and scope, how we collaborate with key partners, and then to bridge into how we think about geospatial information sharing and leverage those concepts and ideas in our work. The key ideas here are that geospatial techniques and concepts are key enablers for broader information sharing and safeguarding, and that the geospatial community, because of the cross-cutting nature of the work, is positioned to be leaders in advancing that broader information sharing and safeguarding. The National Strategy for Information Sharing and Safeguarding in the U.S. was signed out by President Obama in 2012. It defines the vision for responsible information sharing. And read the last part of this. The strategy points to a future in which information supports national security decision-making by providing the right information at the right time to any authorized user, restricted only by law or policy, not technology, and where safeguarding measures to include a comprehensive regime of accountability prevent the misuse of information. The strategy is available at our website, www.isc.gov. It's a broad vision, it's expansive in its scope, and within that vision sits the terrorism-related information sharing environment for which I'm responsible. The scope of the information sharing environment is across the entire federal government in the U.S., our state, local, and tribal partners, private sector, and our international allies. The information sharing environment spans 5 communities: law enforcement, defense, intelligence, homeland security, and foreign affairs. It's a cross-cutting construct, and it's squarely within the scope and exists within the National Strategy for Information Sharing and Safeguarding, but again with a focus on terrorism-related cross-cut. 6 big ideas inform our work. First, the information sharing environment is a distributed and decentralized yet coordinated environment. It's not a new system, a new agency, it's not operational. It really is an environment that harmonizes and leverages existing agencies and their missions. The second big idea is that it's all about dual use. Every one of our stakeholders has a broad and expansive mission beyond the terrorism-related challenge. None of our stakeholders want to build terrorism-specific systems or infrastructure. They want to have a unified infrastructure that works across the full scope of their missions, yet interoperates with their partners. Sharing and safeguarding are 2 sides of the same coin. The same measures you can take to improve safeguarding, which includes information security and safeguarding the privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties of citizens that may be represented in the information, also improve confidence with information sharing and support that regime of accountability to prevent misuse of information. The 4th big idea is that this is a data-centric concept. It's about integrating and connecting existing databases, networks, and systems. Again, not new systems. The 5th big idea is it's all about prevention, preventing harm, enhancing resilience and security. And then finally, this only works on a bed of standards. Right? It only works with the partnership of the information technology industry, helping to inform those standards, adopting those standards so that public sector agencies can procure interoperable solutions that support the information sharing and safeguarding mission broadly. Now, within the scope of our remit, we're focused on the domestic nexus of national security and public safety. In the U.S., it's quite daunting. Our public safety enterprise is very distributed in our constitutional system, in our open democracy, an emphasis on local control, just to highlight one fact. In the US, we have 18,000 police departments, law enforcement agencies. Most of them are small. 90% have 50 or fewer sworn officers. So again, that limits the capacity of individual agencies, but still has the challenge. How do we bring 800,000 police officers in the US into a unified architecture to support the counterterrorism, homeland security mission? We've had success with this. An example is something that may be familiar to you all as the Nationwide Suspicious Activity Reporting Initiative. The public awareness campaign to this is known as See Something, Say Something. It standardizes what law enforcement has been doing since a long time. Officers in their communities, interacting with those communities, seeing suspicious activity, and taking action to protect their communities. What we've done is standardize that process and create a national framework so that we have neighborhood watch for the nation, defining 16 behaviors reasonably indicative of terrorism-related activity or pre-operational criminal planning. Standardizing the data collection behind looking at those suspicious activity reports. Harmonizing privacy policies to ensure that constitutionally protected activity is filtered out and that community engagement stays strong and community support remains. This is something that we've been able to standardize across the US, from training, policy, information technology, and all the rest. So as daunting and fragmented as the slide looks, we look at that as actually a feature, not a bug of our open society in the US. And we've had some success in tying things together. Now, how do we do that? Critical to our conception of how to leverage geospatial information and more broadly information sharing and safeguarding is building out collaboration maps that integrate our stakeholders. So starting at the top, I chair a government-wide governance committee around information sharing, terrorism-related information sharing that integrates key national security and public safety agencies. That's where at the federal level we come together and are able to identify common requirements and then leverage common approaches. Critical though is bringing in our non-federal partners. You saw on the previous slide the degree to which the law enforcement community in the US is anchored with our state and local partners. Public safety is really a state and local activity in the US, not necessarily driven by the federal government. We use the Criminal Intelligence Coordinating Council as a place to do that. That's an advisory committee that's a part of the US Department of Justice. And the way we work in the US is that we use national professional associations that represent different aspects of law enforcement, homeland security, non-federal partners, because you can't call a meeting with 18,000 people. It's too many, it's too big. It works though, and this is a construct that actually predates 9/11, but it's gotten a lot of steam and made a lot of progress since then. The third leg of the stool is our work with industry and international standards organizations through the Standards Coordinating Council. Let me expand on that. So the Standards Coordinating Council is a critical forum for us where we bring together international standards organizations, including the Open Geospatial Consortium, the Object Management Group, OASIS, bring together governmental standards organizations like the National Institute for Standards and Technology, and several industry associations that are, of course, focused on Washington, D.C. It's about standards coordination, not standards management. It's not a standards organization. It's a voluntary organization. Folks participate through their own decision-making process, and it's where we coordinate on information sharing and safeguarding standards with a goal of harmonizing those standards so that more broadly interoperable solutions are available to all. I encourage you to go to our website for the Standards Coordinating Council, www.standardscoordination.org, to learn more about what we do there. So now bridging to how we think about the geospatial continuum. And first, that funnel at the center of the slide, that's not a satellite, it is a funnel. And what we're trying to emphasize in this is that we look at the geospatial information and the role of standards as a continuum. At certain stages of the process, data collection, data processing, use of information, there are higher constraints around safeguarding security and privacy. Over time, you collaborate with further partners within the federal government, with our state and local partners, and eventually in certain open data scenarios. Think about disaster relief, disaster management, and things like that. Critical to our mission is consistency across the standards, across that entire continuum, thinking about issues, for example, like access control, enforcing security constraints, enforcing privacy requirements, ensuring that aggregations of data, to the extent that they are made in the public domain, aren't subject to unmasking of personally identifiable information, things like that. So how do we then operationalize this? We've been working with our partners. In the US, the Federal Geographic Data Committee, a government-wide advisory committee around responsible geospatial information sharing. The Office of Management and Budget in the White House that controls the federal enterprise architecture to build out something called the Geospatial Interoperability Reference Architecture. This describes a reference architecture and a process to support agencies in delivering interoperable geospatially enabled capabilities that support both the terrorism-related mission as well as the broader geospatial and other aspects of their mission suite within agencies. An interesting fact about this reference architecture is that it's approximately 50% on the process. How do you do it? The biggest single topic treated in the document is governance. Right? How do you bring together authoritatively the different stakeholders in a way where you can support effective collaboration towards common solutions based on common requirements? 30% is policy, 20% is the technology. So the technology is actually the smallest piece, which is a real testament to the maturation of the geospatial industry, right? And reflecting the fact that geospatial capabilities are key enablers to broader capabilities. So to tie it all together, geospatial capabilities underpin so many aspects of the work that we do. An example that I'd like to highlight, again, is concepts around place-based policing in the US. Terrorism is a national security concern, but terrorism is also a crime. And in many ways, the current manifestation of the terrorism threat in the US focus on radicalization and mobilization in place, the lone wolf type of threat. The front line for that is state and local law enforcement. Place-based policing is an emerging concept in the US. It turns out that academic research in the US shows that in many ways the best indicator of crime and the best way to prevent crime is to focus on places that are associated with high levels of crime. Again, a geospatially enabled capability. One study identified that 50% of the crime over a 10-year period in a major city in the US was tied to about approximately 3.5% of the addresses. So, another study showed that about half of the crime was driven by about 1,500 micro segments of addresses, but about 6,000 perpetrators. So there was a 4-to-1 advantage on focusing on location versus what's called the usual suspects. So I'd like to end by showing you a short video that highlights how we work with the Standards Coordinating Council, in particular the Open Geospatial Consortium, on a recent test bed. At the end of the day, standards are great, policy is great. What really counts is working systems. And demonstrating those working systems in a neutral international forum really goes a long way to driving industry adoption, stakeholder confidence, and eventual results for the taxpayers. So let me see, okay.
The Open Geospatial Consortium is a collaborative international forum focused on developing standards that improve the world's ability to share spatial data. To advance the United States President's Climate Data Initiative, the OGC committed to enabling open access to climate information using open standards. The work in Testbed 11 was developed across 4 threads and addressed the challenge of integrating spatial or location information when a population is displaced due to coastal inundation. When a flood is predicted, emergency managers run a number of simulation models to help understand what might happen. Operators can interact with these models via web services, accessing and validating the results. Because critical data needs to be shared securely, the Geo4NEEM thread demonstrated how to integrate government security standards where classified information is involved. When each user makes a request, it is intercepted and checked in a policy enforcement point that filters the data based on the user's role. Aviation data models ensure that complex data is encoded to enable delivery of critical information to pilots and operators regarding changes, construction, closure of runways, and weather conditions while they're in the air. OGC standards that support cross-community interoperability allow all of these threads to collaborate, solving semantic issues. The testbed advanced several OGC standards by defining a common set of implementation guidelines, leveraging social media, linked data, semantics, and mediation to bridge communities' different information models and symbologies.
It does very little good for you to build a project or a program that only works for you, where you can't possibly share your data or information with anybody else or access their data and information.
We often provide a small component in a workflow to deliver a system solution, and it wouldn't happen if interoperability is not a critical requirement in this workflow.
We're trying to execute a national strategy to improve information sharing and interoperability across the country on really important Homeland Security, national security missions. And these tools have direct relevance to fulfilling that mission.
But they have real issues on the ground. Your local police, your water authority, public works, law enforcement, all of these organizations have serious issues to deal with. They have interoperability challenges. And if we use our testbed process to model their issues with industry, we can create the standards and the solutions they need. We can help them help themselves, and the outcomes will then be of global benefit.
There we go. So, I show that video because we see our mission as showing the way for our key stakeholders, working with our partners in industry and international standards organizations. And at the end of the day, we think that the testbed process and working with the Standards Coordinating Council has really provided a wonderful venue for enhancing collaboration internationally. If anybody's interested in any more information about the topics I've talked about, there's a lot of information on our website, www.isc.gov. I also would highlight the standardscoordination.org website, www.standardscoordination.org. And I'd also just reinforce the point that the members of the Standards Coordinating Council are in many cases international organizations with membership here in India, and so there's avenues directly for collaboration and leverage of a lot of the ideas, topics, and concepts that I've discussed. So in closing, thank you very much for your time and attention. It's wonderful for me to be here in India, personally and professionally. Dhanyavad.